Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unsubscribe, the demandDrive podcast. I am your host, AJ Alonso, and I'm joined by a co-host today. Big day for me because I don't have to do all the talking. It's Alex Ellison. Come on down.
After that, I might make you do all the talking anyway.
Oh, it's getting loopy today already. Alex, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, AJ?
I'm loopy, but good. Alex, who do we, okay, it's not just us. We're not going to do all the talking. Who else do we have on the podcast today?
Oh, I get to introduce Chelsea?
You get to do it. It's
Sweet.
Chelsea.
Awesome. A little spoiler, I said her name. Today we've got Chelsea Leahy. She's our director of training here at demandDrive. And we're going to talk about sort of growing up and out of the SDR role.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited. This is going to be a lot of fun. I can already tell right off the bat with the energy you're bringing. It's going to be a good one.
To lift the energy up. It's the lack of caffeine in me that forces me to energize myself like this.
There you go.
Chelsea, you're actually returning. I listened to your old podcast episode from like 2019 recently to remember the fact that you have been on the podcast before. So welcome back.
That's right. Honestly, that slipped my mind. I forgot that I'm like a repeat guest. This is very exciting. I hope I can redeem myself or do better.
You're in rarefied air, I would say. We don't have a lot of repeat guests on the show. And honestly, the last episode that you had was great. And it ties into what we're talking about today. So I had to remind myself what we talked about to make sure that I could segue properly. But the last time you were here, we talked about building a comprehensive training program, like how important it really is to have somebody like you, a director of training in place, to build the strong foundation for all SDRs who come in to just learn the skills, make sure that they're successful in their first 30, 60, 90 days, and then when to know to sort of like kick them out of the nest and let them do their own thing. Today, I think we're gonna take it sort of to that next step and talk not just about making sure that they can succeed in the role, but after their life as an SDR. So before we kind of dive into all of that, let's give everyone a refresh of who you are, what you do at demandDrive, why you became an SDR, and your path to sort of get to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I had quite kind of a unique start at demandDrive. So I started with the team back in 2015. When we were just a really small, tight-knit group. AJ, you remember those days, blue room, orange room. And
rivalry of ages.
Yeah. And if I'm remembering correctly, if memory serves me right, I think I was employee like number 28 to be hired. And
oh, wow.
For reference, for those listening, we're pushing 200 employees at this point in time. So seeing quite a bit of growth in my 6.5 years here. But yeah, before I started at demandDrive, I had quite a background in terms of like customer service, a lot of time, face-to-face with people. I worked in retail all throughout high school, and then after college, and then also worked for a little while as a customer service manager in a gym. So really built a lot of those like communication, personable skills that really tie into sales, as you guys know. And, at the time in 2015, I was working at the gym, and quite frankly, like my life was miserable. I hated it. It was terrible. It was such a bad job. And my brother-in-law was actually working at demandDrive at the time. And he was always, in my ear about, you got to check it out. You got to come interview. You would be great at sales. It's a great company. The people are awesome. You got to come check it out. And so, finally I was like, all right, I got to see what all the hype is about, right? So that's what kind of brought me to demandDrive initially. And so I did the SDR role for a whole 3.5 years. And within that time, what's really interesting is for 2 of those 3 years, I was actually working remotely from California, which was kind of unique at that time, right? That was like pre-pandemic, pre-remote world, really. And so what really ended up happening was I noticed that I wasn't meeting a lot of the people that were coming onto the team. Like Alex, I think you actually joined when I was out in LA.
Yep.
And, it was hard to kind of get to know my colleagues. And so what I started to do was like I would do role plays with all of the new hires that joined, and it was a way for me to, one, like, meet all of the new people coming through the door, and to, take on a little bit of extra responsibility outside of what my day-to-day was. And that was kind of what sparked my passion for like training and coaching and working with people, and providing feedback and structure. And so fast forward a couple years, I moved back to the Boston area, and demandDrive was continuing to grow, and there was definitely a need for some more structure and all of that around training. And so that's kind of how my role that I'm in now was born. I decided to take that idea to Dan and Lindsay and say, hey, like, I think this is something that we really need, and something that I'm passionate about. And then I guess you could say the rest is history. Here I am.
As they say. It's your story, I think, mimics a lot of people at demandDrive, and it is unique in the sense that we have this ability to kind of dip our hands into a bunch of different buckets, or swim in different lanes, as people say. But doing your SDR job and then finding out through just trial and error that you had a passion for something else, and in your case, training. In other cases, it's recruiting or marketing or customer success or whatever. And then being able to like act on that, right? So finding your little niche there and carving out a role, or fitting your puzzle piece in this larger organization, where it's like, this is necessary. Like, not only do I enjoy doing this, but we need it because of X, Y, Z, and I'm going to build it because of that. Unique, but also like probably something that a person listening to this right now who is an SDR that has some of those longer term career aspirations can easily relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think you hear people say something like this a lot, but nobody's just going to hand something to you. Nobody's going to say, hey, Chelsea, we need somebody to do training. Here you go. Right. It's really up to you as an individual to, find those gaps, or find those holes, or find those homes for yourself, and really think about how can you make an impact in that role for the organization as a whole. Sometimes for the folks that are higher up and they're in it day to day, they don't always see some of those areas that some of the other folks that are in the weeds might say, ooh, we need some help when it comes to this area. Maybe I could kind of take the reins and help with that. And so I think it's really important, like I said, to just, if you have an idea, talk to the people that are involved, see how you can get involved, or participate more. 9 times out of 10, there ends up being some sort of path within that realm that, maybe it's not full time, but maybe it's something that you can do on the side with your current job that can kind of, fill that like need for a little bit more, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that proactivity that you're touching on is really one of the main aspects to we'll talk more about how maybe managers can help SDRs grow out of the role, but I think it all starts with the SDR themselves either wanting or feeling like they need to be challenged in another way, to grow in a different direction. They're looking for something, and not only are they just looking around, but they're going to actively find it. And I think that's a big step that I think managers have to know how to enable within reps that might be more shy, but that reps themselves should work towards feeling comfortable taking steps like that. Yes, it's a risk. Yeah, it's something new. No, it's not in your job description, but in order to get to sort of where you need to go, sometimes you have to take steps like that. And the worst thing that happens is you fail, and then you learn from it, and you move on and you grow. So
yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. And I think it's to, taking that ownership, and coming with an idea, right? That's a huge part of it. When you're wanting to get involved with something, there's a huge difference between somebody that comes to me and says, hey, Chelsea, I want to help with training. And I'm like, great, in what capacity? And then they don't know, right? Versus somebody that comes to me and says, hey, Chelsea, I feel like I'm really strong when it comes to emails, and I would love to run a workshop about how to increase your response rate and your open rate. right? That is what, people are going to be really looking for, is come with an idea, come with some sort of format or structure of what it is that you're really looking for, because that's going to increase your chances of actually, being able to execute on some of those things versus just saying, hey, I'm a little interested in learning more or getting involved, but I don't know how to do it. Think a little outside of the box and see if there's, ideas or things that you can really bring to the table when it comes to initiating those types of conversations.
Bring up a interesting point, I think, and I think culturally a lot of organizations who aren't seeing this, like SDRs who have this desire to maybe leverage the skills that they're building into other departments. It could be like either they don't feel, Alex, like you said, comfortable kind of going to management and voicing this, or there hasn't ever really been an instance where that's happened at the organization. So from a cultural perspective, you have no idea as an SDR how to act on that, but it is still kind of on you to know that you should act on that, right? Like, to your point, Chelsea, no one's going to give you anything. And if your manager or the marketing department or the HR department don't know that you have this desire or some of these extra skills that you built up that could help other reps, they're never going to approach you about it. So there's sort of this weird line that I think you have to toe, and maybe you can speak to this, Chelsea, because you've seen so many people do it in your sort of career. But how do you know that as an organization, you've built a system in which SDRs can feel comfortable voicing their opinions and going to management, and also enabling those SDRs to do that by providing maybe some pathways or documentation or something to let them know that, like, this is possible. Like, you don't just have to be an SDR forever. There's other paths for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like creating that culture really starts with communication and transparency, right? Like letting people know right off the bat when they're joining your organization, like, what are the common career paths that you see for people starting off in that role? How long does it typically take to get there? What are some of the skill sets that people are really looking for when it comes to being bumped up or moved over to a different role? Because the more that those conversations are had and the more that that information is made available, the more that the SDR or whoever it is at any organization can take that more on their, like, can take some ownership of that and say, okay, now I have the information I need as to how to get to this next level, or how to get over to the marketing department, or, customer success, or whatever it is. And that gives them some of those tangible things to work towards while they're in their current role, of skills that they might need to build up to be able to get over into that role. So I really do think it starts with that communication and that just availability of the information that people need in order to build up in those areas, if you will.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we keep talking about, sort of SDRs doing this, their team needs to do this. I'm curious to dive into it. What are some strategies that you've seen work for managers to really enable the SDRs to feel comfortable to be proactive and to reach out to the right people in the right way about this sort of thing?
Yeah, I think a first really good start is letting the SDR know that their main focus is their role right now. Nobody is going to feel comfortable taking you onto your team or moving you somewhere else if you are not putting your hardest work into what you're doing today. So if I'm an SDR and I'm like, ooh, I want to try training, but I'm not hitting goal, I'm not a team player, I'm bringing down the morale of the team, my manager's not going to feel comfortable saying, yeah, Chelsea's definitely going to want you on her team, So I think that's the first thing, is nail it out of the park with what you're doing right now. Even if it's not the most exciting job or something that you're super passionate about, regardless of what role you're in, there's going to be some set of skills that you can learn that will be helpful wherever you go next. So really hone in on that and really master that craft. And then once you're at that stage, I think you have a little bit more of leverage and a little bit more of a hand to say to a manager, for instance, hey, I've really been crushing it at this job. I've learned a lot. Here's some of the things that I think I can carry with me to something else. What are some of those next steps to kind of get to where I want to be? And I think from a manager's perspective, one of the best things you can do is have regular conversations with your team and know right off the bat what their goal is. Is their goal to become an AE and close deals one day? Is their goal to learn more about the SDR role because they want to get more into the marketing side? Is their goal to become an SDR manager one day, right? And then depending upon where those goals are, that manager has the ability to maybe add some extra responsibilities onto that SDR's plate that kind of fit into that role that they're looking to get into. So if I have an SDR on my team that's maybe looking to become an SDR manager one day, maybe I start to have them mentor me a little, or not mentor me, but shadow me a little bit as far as like, here's how I handle, this part of the job, or maybe they can help me build reports and learn that side of it. So I think as far as those things go, it definitely is a two-way street. It can't be all on the SDR, and it definitely can't be all on the manager. There has to be some sort of, agreement, if you will, in between the two, as far as, getting somebody elevated to a new role, or, somewhere else within the organization.
I've always looked at that relationship as like a you help me and I'll help you type situation, like you were talking about. And I heard this recently. I forget who said it, and it's going to bother me until I remember or I write it down somewhere and I never forget it. But what you want to be as an SDR in the position that you were talking about is to be easy to root for. Like you want to be that team player. You want to make sure that you're putting in your dials. You want to show that you care about doing well, because when you do that, then all of these opportunities are going to open up for you, like you were saying. I think that's a great way to sum that up.
Yeah, and those are the intangibles, right? That you can't teach somebody. You can't teach somebody to be passionate. You can't teach somebody to be curious, but you can teach somebody the skills that go along with a certain role or a certain job. So as long as you are, showing those areas of, hey, I might not be the best at sales, but I'm still trying really hard. I'm asking good questions. I'm helping people on my team. Those are the things that, at least from my perspective, I would be looking for in somebody to join my team, right? I can teach them the basics, but what I can't teach is that work ethic or that drive to do better or to learn more. So I think, yeah, you really hit the nail on the head there, AJ. I would agree with you on that. No doubt. Those are the things that are really important when it comes to, being able to leverage or move throughout an organization or, out of an organization as well.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, you're really hitting on the fact that like SDRs can come from anywhere. I know demandDrive has more SDRs than most, and they really do come from all over the place, but it means there's just so many ways to be successful. And as long as you can figure out successful for you, those are the skills that are going to help you your future career. Maybe you realize, hey, you're really good at writing emails, and then you become a copywriter. Like maybe you realize you're really good on the phone, you become an AE. Maybe you realize you're better at speaking with upsell or renewal opportunities, and maybe customer success is right for you. But unless you get successful at that SDR role, really like the base and the foundation of all these types of skills, you're not going to know what direction to move. You might just like be throwing darts at a wall, guess, oh, maybe I'm good at marketing. I don't know. Maybe I'm good at sales. Who knows? And that's just not a productive way to move your career forward.
No.
I think to that point, though, there are, and it's few and far between, there are some programs out there with larger companies that have the resources to sink into something like this, but building out sort of like tracks for their SDRs and letting them know that, like, and Chelsea, I'd love your opinion on this, but say you work for a huge organization and they're like, listen, your job is an SDR, like you're booking meetings for our AE team. But after 6 months, if you've hit certain goals and like you're ramped and stuff, we'll give you the opportunity to go down the marketing track. And for like 3 months, you shadow someone on the marketing team, you find out whether or not like this is something you're interested in career-wise. The whole time you're still doing the SDR role. Yeah. Give you another opportunity after those 3 months to do finance or biz dev or HR, like whatever. And sort of building out this more well-rounded SDR so that not only are you getting experience in all of these different departments, but to your point, Alex, like you're finding out what you like to do and what you don't like to do. And that's crucial for you moving forward in terms of actually creating a career for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think just alone in the SDR role, you learn so many skills that are transferable to so many different roles. I mean, being an SDR, you're learning personable skills, which can be tied to customer success or further down the sales cycle, become an AE or something like that. You're learning, how leads are generated and how they get to a team like an SDR, right? And so maybe you want to go more down the marketing path. You're also likely working with other SDRs and helping to mentor them and coach them, which gives you some sort of hand in like either SDR management or training and coaching. And so I think it really is about, like I said earlier, giving your all into what you are doing today. And if you make the most out of this job, even if it's not something that you see yourself being in forever, which I would say is probably the case for most people in an SDR role, right? But don't look at it that way, right? Look at it as, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 years in this role. I'm going to learn as much as I possibly can. And then I'm going to take that and use that to become an AE or move to the marketing department. But it really is about, honing in on those skills that you can learn in that role and then capitalizing on those as you kind of like spread your wings to wherever you're going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
AJ flapping his arms. I love it. On that note, Chelsea, I'd be curious to see if you had an opinion on this or if there even was a standard number, but like how long do you think an SDR should stay in that role before looking to explore these opportunities or growing out of the position?
Yeah, that's honestly a hard one to answer. I think it can vary from person to person. And I think it can also depend on like where you're looking to go, right? If you're looking to be an AE, I would say you need at least a year in the SDR role, if not longer, and specific to the type of sale that you're going to be doing, right? So whereas like if you're looking to maybe go into the marketing side, maybe it's like a little bit less or around that year mark. Same thing with like maybe training or mentoring. But I would say like baseline is give yourself a year in the role. It can really take a bit of time to get fully ramped up as an SDR. I know you both know, you were both in the role, right? It's not a snap of the finger, I'm great at this job. You can be really, really good in a lot of these areas, but there's still a learning curve. You've got to learn an industry, you've got to learn tech, you've got to learn, how to navigate conversations, overcome objections, how to qualify. You got to learn the whole tools side of everything. You got to learn the CRM, you got to learn, email tracking or anything along those lines, sales enablement. There's so many pieces that you have to learn in this job, and you're not going to learn it overnight. So I would say a year, like minimum, if as an SDR will give you a good idea as to one, are you cut out for sales and is that what you want to do? Or two, learn those basic skills to then, like we've been talking about, go elsewhere, either within your own company or somewhere else.
I just did a little bit and looked it up, but I guess the average tenure for an SDR currently is somewhere between 13 and 18 months, depending on like industry, company size, et cetera, et cetera. So like to your point, Chelsea, I think, and you brought up something super important that I think kind of gets glossed over a little bit when you talk to an SDR who does aspire to become like an account executive. It's building up the skills and knowledge in a specific area that you're interested in and will then move into in your next role. And I think a lot of the challenges that stem with that promotion from SDR to AE come from the fact that you could be an SDR at a smaller organization that sells like a transactional product, and the ACV is $500 and the sales cycle is 2 weeks and you're killing it. And then you get a new job as an AE at an enterprise level organization where the ACV is $500,000 and the sales cycle was 9 months.
Right.
Those are two totally different jobs. And just because you killed it as an SDR doesn't mean you're going to be a good AE, because a lot of the training that you've had, frankly, outside of the foundational stuff, probably isn't worth anything at that point. So I know that's one challenge that a lot of reps face when they kind of move out of the role. Is there anything else that you see when SDRs move out, maybe into marketing or customer success or finance or wherever they go?
Yeah, I mean, I think just a common challenge, regardless of what job you're in, moving to something else, is just when you have been doing something for X amount of time, right? There's a level of confidence that comes with that. You know what each day-to-day is going to entail. You probably have it down to a science, right? Of like, okay, my day starts at this time, I can get this part of the job done in this amount of time. And if there's one thing I've learned throughout my career, time management is key, no matter what job you are doing. And I think that can be the hardest part about a new job, right? Is figuring out, how do I break this down into sizable chunks to work on without getting overwhelmed and be able to get my work done on time. And so that's going to change drastically from, different roles, as far as like what your workload is and what timelines you have to get things done. And so, I see that a lot with new hires that come in. Some of the things that they struggle with the most is like structuring their day, right? Figuring out, okay, how much time should I be spending researching versus calling versus writing new email templates versus responding to things in my inbox versus meeting with other people and things like that. And so I think that that's a challenge that you're always going to have, no matter what role you change into, or even if you stay in the same role, but maybe you get more responsibility piled on. It's always about kind of figuring out, okay, how do I tweak what I'm doing to streamline this process and make sure that, everything's getting done on time. So I would say for sure that's a huge one that I would say I see often, internally and outside as well.
Interesting too, because that's like, I think that time management skill is part of, not intangible, but part of that, like what you gain foundationally in the growing up portion of the SDR role. Like, to be a successful SDR, you definitely have to have those time management skills. And growing out of the role, you need to take what you've learned and just tweak it to fit your new role. So like, that can't be the only example. I'm sure there's plenty of others, but like, no matter where you go, I think it's not just learning new things that get you out of the SDR role. It's taking the stuff that you've already learned and just repurposing it for whatever you're doing next.
Yeah.
It's daunting, right? To think that like, I'm an SDR and all I know is to make phone calls and send emails and book meetings. And I have this passion for marketing. Like, how do I take that and turn it into marketing? There's so many different ways to just repurpose your frame of thought to go from like, okay, like I'm good at writing emails. Alex, to your point from earlier, maybe I can just turn that into a copywriting gig and start working in content marketing. Like, it's when you see it and it's visible, it's so obvious, but to communicate that to someone who is an SDR that's been in the role for 9 months, I'm sure you've seen it, Chelsea, and you've done it. It's difficult to get them to like wrap their mind around that.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah. There's just so many parts, like I was saying earlier, that go into the SDR role, especially at demandDrive, because of our unique business model and because we are, working with clients. These SDRs are learning how to communicate with so many different people across different platforms, managing multiple people's calendars. These are skills that I think people overlook that are so crucial to success in a job, regardless of what job it is. And I think especially too, what's unique about demandDrive is we work with a lot of, smaller organizations. And so a lot of our entry level SDRs are exposed to really high level people that they're communicating with on a day-to-day basis. That's something that's really nerve wracking for a lot of, young people in the workforce. And so being able to learn that at such an early stage of their career is going to help build that confidence, right? And they're learning so many more skills, aside from being an SDR at one place where they're maybe just working with one AE, and maybe just selling one type of technology. It allows for that kind of that breadth of skills that they're adding to their portfolio of things that they can do. It's really interesting. That's the way that I like to look at it about demandDrive. There's a lot outside, up above just being an SDR and making calls that you learn, just being an employee here, which is really cool.
At demandDrive.
Oh, what did you say? Sorry, your audio cut.
Classic audio cut. I was going to say that was a not so subtle plug to just, hey, come down, work at demandDrive.
I mean, it's really unique. It's cool. That's always been one of my favorite things about working at demandDrive. I had the ability to work with a couple of different clients, and learn different technologies that honestly I had no idea even existed until I worked at demandDrive, and it really just it broadens your whole world of like, wow, who knew this type of thing existed. And then you also get to learn about it in detail, which is just so cool. So I think like the times when I found myself in a rut, in the SDR role, which we've all been there, I know you have, those were the things that I would remind myself of. Like, I'm getting some knowledge and experience here that I wouldn't be getting anywhere else. And that's kind of like, I think what you have to do when you're in some of those ruts or when you're having a down, slow month, is really like thinking about those skills that you're actually gaining and can use to your advantage further down the line.
For sure. Yeah, I think even if you're not working here at demandDrive, like any SDR can take that and use it. Just thinking ahead, 5 years from where you are, like how you can take the skills that you have and leverage them in some capacity, because you don't know what your career is going to look like realistically in the next 2 years, 5 years, whatever. So why not spend the now learning as much as you possibly can to best prepare yourself for the future?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my take. Awesome. Well, Chelsea, I don't know if you had any last sort of like words of wisdom for the audience or anything around how to effectively grow up and out of the SDR role. But I mean, I had a great time. This was a solid conversation.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. I relived some memories.
Yeah.
10 out of 10. I'd do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been wonderful. I think I would just say, like, especially for those, SDRs that are newer in your career, my one piece of advice, and even if you're not new in your career, is don't be afraid to like have some of those uncomfortable conversations with your manager. If you are interested in other areas, let them know that your manager can't help you if they don't know what it is that you're trying to work towards. And 9 times out of 10, they can probably, like I said, maybe give you some side responsibilities that tie into that, or have you help out on another team or something along those lines. But we don't know what we don't know. So unless you're going to have some of those conversations that, yeah, sometimes they can be awkward to approach. But just because you're interested in growing doesn't mean that you're saying to your manager, I don't want to do this job anymore. So, just don't be afraid to approach your, higher ups with some of those questions or some of those conversations to get that ball rolling. Because I've always found that when I was an SDR, I was like more passionate about just the SDR job when I was helping with training. So sometimes when you're doing that side project, it can give you that boost in the SDR role that you need to kind of, keep going and give you some more things to work towards. So yeah, I guess that would be my last piece of advice is, just don't shy away from those conversations because they're only going to help you in the long run.
A+ advice from Chelsea. Well, thanks again for being on this episode of Unsubscribe. If anyone wants to connect with you, find out more about you, get in touch with you, how can they do that? Do you have a LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter? What are we talking?
Absolutely. LinkedIn is probably the best way. So I'm sure you can probably like attach my link to this or however you guys in marketing work your magic. So I'll let you guys handle that part, but yeah, absolutely. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love having these types of conversations and helping people. Obviously it's in my blood considering I love that training and coaching. So yeah, ask away if you guys have any questions.
Medical marvel, Chelsea Leahy. Yeah. What is training? All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for another episode of Unsubscribe. Until next time.
Thanks.